The 1923 Williams Treaty was a result of 7 Anishinaabe communities protesting the encroachment and exploitation of their lands since the mid-1800s. The 1923 treaty involved 13 million acres of land in exchange for a one-time cash payment of $25 per person of the 7 bands. The signatories were forced to sign without lawyers during one-day negotiations, and where hunting and harvesting rights on their traditional territory were extinguished fraudulently by the Crown. In 1764, the Niagara Covenant Chain Belt, the Annual Presence Belt, and the Two-Row Wampum Belt ratified the Royal Proclamation of the UK. These agreements is where we permitted the British to exist in our lands peacefully as allies, and set the foundation for all treaties, which included annual gifts, which later became annuities for each member of a band in a treaty. The 1923 Williams Treaty never included annuities. This treaty, via the stated rule of law, was never and is not a treaty, but was only an illegal land sale. In 2018, the Williams Treaty Settlement Agreement attempted to rectify this injustice, but was only a repeat of history, where a one-time payment of $1.1 billion was given to the 7 Indian Act bands for the improper compensation in 1923 for such lands and the loss of hunting and harvesting rights. The 2018 settlement permitted that each band could buy back their stolen land, but only a total of 11,000 acres from any Ontario citizen willing to sell. In this agreement, harvesting rights were also reinstated, but restricted only to a very insignificant small area known as Treaty 20 for all the 7 bands to hunt in. Also within this settlement agreement, the bands had to extinguish their underlying title to these 13 million acres and release Ontario and Canada from any potential or future matters regarding this territory. The settlement agreement also didn't include any revenue sharing agreement created from the resources of these 13 million acres, no inclusion of the right to education and health care, nor acknowledged or restored our inherent right to govern ourselves through our own Anishinaabe clan system, or the removal of the Indian Act to uphold the Two-Row Wampum within the 1764 Niagara Covenant. Also, the Indian Act bands in 1923 and 2018 had no lawful and legal right to speak for our clans of our nation, who are the rightful title holders. These Indian Act bands, through such surrenders, are nothing but agents of the Crown via the Indian Act, and are designated as a federal board under the Federal Courts Act. This ain't the last of the story. In 1850, hereditary clan chiefs Assance, Snake, and Yellowhead, 1 week after the Robinson-Huron Treaty was signed, they met with W.B. Robinson. They asserted significant lands were surrendered in the Robinson-Huron Treaty that belonged to them, and that they should have been in these negotiations and this treaty. Today, this goes unresolved. The so-called Chippewas of Rama, Georgina, and Beausoleil should have been included in the Robinson-Huron Treaty and should have been and be receiving annuities and included in the current Robinson-Huron annuity settlement. But the members extinguished that right in the 2018 take it or leave it sellout agreement. What is not being questioned in these settlements across our territories is the argument that so-called Canada has no constitution. It only has an incorporation document for a corporation, deceptively called the Charter of Rights and Freedoms and the 1982 Constitution Act. Canada and the provinces are not legitimate, lawful, and legal governments, and are occupying and exercising jurisdiction and authority within our territories through an immense act of fraud. The Crown extinguished its jurisdiction and authority and gave up its lands obtained by treaties in its dominions via the 1931 Statute of Westminster, where all lands of the Dominion of Canada obtained by treaties reverted back to our lands. I'll share more on that in another video. We never made any nation-to-nation covenant with the federal government of Canada, so-called federal government of Canada, or its provinces. Canada is not even a federal government, but only a corporation guised as one. These sellout Indians, by these settlements, are legitimizing the fraudulent federal government and its provinces. They have no lawful and legal standing, and who are also usurping the sovereignty and hard-earned money of the so-called tax-paying Canadian citizen to fork it all over to the international banking syndicate, which also includes the destruction of our lands to create profits to this international global scheme, which has many of our people fooled on the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People. Subscribe for more information. Miigwech.